Anniversaries at Philadelphia. The new school must excuse us for so long neglecting to notice their grand jollifications which came off at the City of Brotherly Love during their anniversary week in April. As we have seen, much of the time from home, and when at our post, a crowd of more important matters having occupied our attention. In defense of some of their favorite institutions, if not the kings of the earth, some who doubtless would be kings stood up, and their great men were assembled. On the subject of tracts, Mr. Samuel White, who was boxed at the compass of pretensions to religious sentiments, been twice baptized because he had professed to find out that his first baptism was prior to his hope of salvation, and we have great reason to fear his second was quite too early, having once professed to be an old-school Baptist, but now an apostate to the faith, bore record that a certain tract, very appropriately called Making Light of Christ, had been the means of converting a sailor into a New School Baptist. The secretary of the Ladies' Tract Society at Scotch Plains stated that another tract had done wonders at that place. Elder J.S. Baker of Norfolk, Virginia, stated that a Catholic had been converted to New Schoolism by a tract which her little sister found. Mr. Babcock, pastor of Spruce Street Church, Philadelphia, furnished another case. Also, James Chalice. All appeared perfectly well satisfied with the operation of this part of their machinery. On the motion to accept the report of the Board of Foreign Missions, the second Cone showed how much their English brethren excelled them in the amount of their contributions to foreign missions, and asserted that they do 10 times as much as the American Society does. He says, moreover, quote, "We must raise at least $100,000 in the next 12 months. We must do it, or be disgraced in the eyes of the Christian community. We must do it, or break the hearts of our missionary brethren," unquote. Poor tender hearts, likely to break for want of $100,000. "We must do it for the glory of God and the salvation of souls," unquote. But can Mr. Cone tell us whether the souls to be saved by $100,000 will not be redeemed with such corruptible things as silver and gold? He very feelingly, of course, adverted to the sacrifices of Adoniram Judson, whose heart is to be broken if the money is not forthcoming, and to the self-denying Mrs. Judson, who wore a shawl away to Burma, said to have cost from $900 to $1,100. He says he is a practical man, and for nearly 25 years has been working in boards. We do not understand him to mean those in which he used to play when a knight of the theater. We presume he means boards of managers. He says, quote, "In my pulpit I endeavor to preach Christ at home, and with my subscription book to preach him abroad," unquote. He boasts of collecting his $1,000 a year for the foreign missions. But how much of it he gives from his own $2,500 salary, or how often his church has to raise $9,000 over his salary to pay off his extravagant debts, he does not say. He says he means to carry his little subscription book as long as he lives, and when he dies, to leave it as an heirloom to his successor. Mr. Webb of New Brunswick, New Jersey, had wonderfuls also to tell, and seconded in due form the motion of Mr. Cone. Dr. Bowles, their corresponding secretary, made a long speech in which he informed pastors of churches that instead of diminishing their own salaries, if they would press their people to give for the institutions, it would be a means of increasing their own pay. This is no doubt one of the grand secrets of New Schoolism. Professor Sears offered a resolution that God's providential care and etc. ought to increase their faith. So Fletcher said he was reminded of the injunction, "Have faith in God, though he says, "We profess to have faith in God and to consecrate all to Him, we are acting upon false principles. Our pride bids us to seek for worldly aggrandizement, and this induces a spirit of covetousness." Hearing so much truth from such a notorious Arminian reminds us of the circumstance of a dumb animal's once speaking in a man's voice and rebuking a certain foreign missionary. Mr. Bennett, the mendicant for the society, said, quote, "One indication of Providence's demanding more faith is present feeling. They all seem to feel very clever, and all agreed that more faith, or a different kind, was necessary." Mr. Dodge, the hickory pole man, said, "Sometimes his heart was too full to speak, and sometimes too empty, and inquired of the gentleman in the chair, 'What is faith?' As he said at that time his heart was full, we do not doubt he was enabled to squeeze out a few tears, as he is wont to do at times." Dr. Welch of Albany felt a deep interest in the business and considers the mission and some other humanly contrived institutions as a string of pearls, radiant in heaven's own brilliancy, but the richest and brightest and most priceless was the mission enterprise. He said it was the wing of the angel. Mr. W. had thought up to that day that he had been doing something for the mission enterprise. He had spread out this cause at the monthly concert and had preached about it, but it gave him pleasure to confess his mistake. He carried no subscription book, but now he was resolved never again to wear a coat without a subscription book in his pocket. He had read that a mighty angel is coming down from heaven with a great chain to bind the old serpent, and he exhorted his brethren to help him weld one of its strongest links. Where he had borrowed the idea that the angel's chain was a broken one, or that it needed welding, he has not informed us. But we guess old Sambo would laugh to think of being bound by a chain welded by B.T. Welch, D.D. and Company. On the whole, the president of the board felt peculiar delight. He had never attended a meeting of the board so full of promise. Cohn, Welch, and others having promised to carry subscription books. The Committee on the Monthly Concert reported a bill authorizing a circular to be sent to every pastor of a Baptist church in the country, urging the importance of sustaining the monthly concert and calling their attention more fully to the missionary hobby. Professor Chase moved to accept the report and hoped the brethren would not only carry a subscription book for missions, but one also for the missionary magazine. Mr. Babcock thought maps as well as magazines would be useful in extorting money from the ladies. Mr. Lincoln was glad when this committee was called for and seconded the motion. Mr. Summers of New York said the question before them demanded the entire approbation of all their powers, mental and moral. He was convinced that in order to obtain funds, they must send out agents. Let this be done, he said, and they would not be obliged to ask whether they should send out more missionaries. Mr. Cohn reminded them of their former resolution, at Richmond, to raise $100,000 during that year. But that, he said, was found in the Book of Resolutions, and not on the Book of Acts. Mr. Dodge was glad that Cohn had more than anticipated him, and we suppose he cried a little more. He concluded that if the people would be enlightened, they would pour in their contributions and beg society to take them. Well, may be so. Mr. Dodge, we presume, is enlightened, and Mr. Cohn and Summers, Welch, Chase, and Babcock, and all the clan. How much have these gentlemen poured in? Mr. Lincoln was gratified to see such a spirit. We presume he must be a discerner of gifts, or he would not have seen it. He hoped it would be cherished, notwithstanding Cohn's motion for welding a chain to bind it. Time, and especially more patience, would fail us to speak of Bowles, Colgate, Crane, Dunbar, and Adams, all of whom seem willing to have an interest in the blessed prospected collecting, under various pretenses, several $100,000 from the people, and place it in their own hands. We close this article with thanksgiving to God. that there are a few names left among the people of his saints whose garments are not defiled with these abominations. Alexandria, Virginia, September 1st, 1839.